It can be very romantic when you realize what you didn't realize. It can be very devastating because we're always falling in and out of love with ourselves and falling in and out of love with our art.
Hello, print friends, and welcome. This is a bilingual podcast, so if you subscribe to us, you'll be getting episodes in English with me, as well as in Spanish with Reinaldo Gil Zambrano. Together we speak to people around the globe about their practice and passions in the field of print media and multiples. This episode is brought to you by Legion Paper. Legion Paper is a fine art paper company that represents the best papers in the world. They either stock it, source it, or make it with brands like Stonehenge, Somerset, Coventry, Reeves, Arches, and more. Legion is the best paper resource for every artist and printmaker's needs. Learn more about the variety of papers Legion stocks at www.legionpaper.com. My guest this week is Peregrine Honig. Peregrine is a multidisciplinary artist whose themes include pop culture, sexuality, and consumerism, and whose work can be found in the permanent collections of the Whitney, the Chicago Art Institute, and the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Together, we talk about the arc of an artist's life and how identity, sensuality, gender all come into play in her own work, as well as her early influences growing up in San Francisco of the 1970s and her search for the perfect line.
Hi, Peregrine. How's it going?
Good. How are you, Miranda?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me. I am really excited to talk to you. I have known your work for a long, long time, and I'm just delighted that I'm going to get a chance to learn more and then share the learning with the Hello Print Friend crowd. So I always ask my artists to introduce themselves, and I always say there's 3 questions, which is just who you are, where you are, what you do. How would you define those?
My name is Peregrine Honig. I grew up in San Francisco, fled back and forth between Kansas City, Missouri, and New Orleans. I've always really made things, and I've always loved posters and music posters, and there was a lot of our crumb around me when I grew up. So I've always been around fine art, but I've always liked the kind of intersection between commercial art and humorous art, like New Yorker magazine humor and fine lines. And I like to hang around in the gray areas when it comes to the word art. I like costuming and I like fashion and I like the space in between those things a lot too.
And just that landscape that you're describing of the R. Crumb and the New Yorker and San Francisco, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because those are those intersections where art comes into our life in a way that we're not necessarily seeking it out. You don't have to go into a white-walled museum in order to interact with those forms of art. But of course, they are a fine art, particularly in the sense of some of those illustrations. Crumb was is an incredible draftsperson. The skills that it takes to create an image that is accessible and effective and readable are very high. Yeah.
Yeah, he's almost a Durer, that line quality. Or even you look at just the hand and pen and ink and how there's just so much to be done with that material. It's universal and it's without class and it's without gender. It's really a way to talk about yourself and your body in a very accessible way, accessible to yourself. And then, as we were saying, accessible to others.
Yeah. What about printmaking in particular? When did that come into your life? When were you aware of it? When did you first start dabbling in it?
I My first real mentor was Ruth Asawa. She saw that I had a quality of line that she pushed me to further and really took me out of school to go draw from the figure. I had really always wanted to make a perfect line. And I don't know where that drive came from. In my life, I've come to be so disappointed in seeing original work and that there is a tape or paint to hide the or corrections when I thought that it was just a flawless line and that the reproduction of the work hid the secrets that there were flaws. So I drew thinking that there were no flaws in certain drawings and wanted to emulate that flawlessness and not do what a lot of my friends are doing, draw a Mickey Mouse or draw this. I really was drawing what I was thinking. And the word illustration has such baggage in the fine art world, but I was really illustrating what I was thinking about. And a lot of my introduction to fine art was through beautiful children's books that were veiled in politics, things that were for children and presented to children by adults, by adults. You look at Maurice Sendak, who's another artist who employs the black line on white paper so articulately, who doesn't have a copy of The Giving Tree in the United States of America. I would assume that most people have seen that book and have read those words. And going back as an adult and looking at that book, it's not a sweet story.
Yeah.
It is very much a story about grief and expectation and not having boundaries when it comes to giving and taking. Those are the kinds of things that affected me and my hope as a child to create. And even getting into the basement in Girl Scouts and finding Playboy and seeing the line drawings in Playboy, beautiful drawings, obviously getting turned on in my Girl Scout uniform, but also in
It held
between,
your attention too, yeah.
right, in between what was forbidden or naughty or whatnot, seeing these sort of jokes and understanding the jokes, being just old enough to understand the jokes. I do see some of the work that people are drawn to in my work. They are attracted to the beauty and they're attracted to the humor. And when we talk about printmaking, I took a printmaking class at the San Francisco Art Institute. I think it was my sophomore summer of high school. A great student who was teaching etching. I had access. There were not a lot of kids in San Francisco. So the schools were it was before extreme testing. A lot of the teachers were not encumbered by that stuff. And I was able to really learn in these magnet school environments that they almost felt like private schools because, again, there was a really low birth rate in 76. And again, San Francisco, there were not a lot of children. And it was a 7 mile city. People I'll meet people, they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I live in San Francisco." And you're like, "Oh, yeah, what street?" Because it's really that small. They're like, "Oh, Palo Alto," or whatever. It's total snobbery. There's no reason. But at this point, it's so expensive to live there. And my parents were renters. We were always moving. It was very stressful. And nobody in my family lives there anymore. But I grew up in talk about imprint or printing. I grew up around all of these people that had moved to the city to be free. I thought all cowboys were gay until I was 8. I really did. It was a really
Mhm.
beautiful innocence that I had. No. And the flower guys up the street, there was a little flower shop and they would put a gardenia in my hair on the way to school. There used to be a lot of people that couldn't have kids, that couldn't adopt. And so I had a lot of uncles and a
Yeah.
lot of them died.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff going on too in terms of print, in terms of seeing how print was used to make people aware of AIDS, like how to clean your needles, or like how to use condoms in these very public spaces. And again, propaganda has such a negative connotation, but is how we get information out to the masses. And when I started printing, a lot of my luck in my life, I've been able to start at the top. And I'm not a better artist. I'm not a smarter person. I'm not prettier or more connected. I'm not a Nepo baby. But my lifelines have had me in the right spaces at the right time, making the work that people wanted in that moment. My prints with my first print with Jack Lemmon came out, and I believe now that there was this, there were a bit of a reaction to Henry Darger's work. So
Mhm.
that was very uncomfortable for people. And without insulting myself, I think maybe my work was the easier take on that spot between sensuality and sexuality in young women versus a janitor in a basement making apocalyptic Xeroxes.
Mm.
And again, that line,
Mhm. The Vivian
um,
girls, yeah.
the Vivian girls, right? That was one of my first drawing teachers.
Wow.
Amazing. And then I had a lot of just my first writing teacher was Dan Handler. So my first creative writing teacher, I went to something called in San Francisco that was called Summer Bridge, and it was for gifted middle schoolers. So I ended up having Dan Handler as a teacher. Yeah, just these moments where you're like, Oyster Boy, talk about an incredible print. Holy shit. Lemony Snicket, talk about an
Mhm.
iconic use of pen and ink. So I've just had access to people that luckily figured out upon meeting them that they were going to lead me towards what I thought I wanted. When it comes to printmaking, the first professional printer I worked with was Jack Lemmon of Landfall Press. I was like, what? I was 20, some shit. I'm still the youngest living artist in the Whitney Museum of American Art's permanent collection because I went to Chicago in the dead of winter and I can handwrite and draw backwards on a copper plate. So they were able to, they're like, oh, how are we going to do these little stencils? And I was like, oh, just hand color all of them. Such minimal amounts of color. Why even bother? And that's why I ended up being at Navy Pier that immediately was because the sample, the first piece was completed and was framed and hanging in the booth.
Just thinking about the ways in which I think people in the art world, there's so much ambition and there's so much passion to make it, to have accolades, to have feathers in one's cap. And as someone who interfaces with the public a lot and with students a lot, I get those questions a lot of how do you do it? How do you get gallery representation? How do you get museum shows? How do you et cetera, et cetera? And I think it's really significant what you're saying about how much of that is right place, right time. Also talent. I mean, like as you said, you could write and draw backwards in a copper plate. Not everyone can do that. So I feel like it's luck and skill and dedication and just the forces of the universe shaking outright. And I think that can be a frustrating answer for people because they want to feel like it's something that they can control. And some of it you can, and a lot of it you can't.
It's absolutely abstract in terms of creating what you're worth to strangers. And I always talk to when I give a talk. I'm about to go to Lake Charles in late fall, where I met one of my favorite people, Megan Green, who I met after the reality show. Her Instagram handles Dainty Dyke. And she just called me from Lake Charles, Louisiana on Facebook. Oh, I wish I could meet you. And that's how she talks because I've known her for 12 years. But she reached out to me on social media and I was like, I'll go to Charles. Like she's in school. She's got is her stipend? So she went to a teacher and asked for if there's a stipend, and there was a ridiculously high stipend. So here I am in Lake Charles, and I make this great print with her print teacher, Larry Shoemaker, Humer at McNeese. So Larry is the print head at McNeese, a master printer in the middle of nowhere, and just elegant, whatever. We all make a print together. And then, of course, because it's so fun, I guess I give everybody that's part of the project a print. So now there's
Mhm.
12, 14 people in Lake Charles, Louisiana that have Mr. Pickles went into rehab. It's just a great print. I fucking love this print. And Mr. Pickles checks into rehab. And they're bringing me back, and there's a gallery that's opening out of they've renovated this bank, and so I'm gonna do another print with McNeese, and everybody's grown up, and they're just so excited to see me because we have had this great experience, and it's a combination of being humble to experience and being brave, and also the financial risk of knowing that sometimes you have to go to New York and you have to sit down and be at the table with people who you might be friends with casually, but you really want to take it to the next level. And that might be an expensive investment in your cultural capital. I'm as excited that the Whitney owns my work as I am that Parker Posey owns my work.
Yeah.
I love that. I want all different kinds of people to live with my work. I have a great art collection and mostly things that am I don't I always confuse jealousy versus envy. Things that I cannot make. My art
Yeah.
collection is a combination of things that I can't make myself. Nobody walks into my home or studio if I have artwork and nobody says, "Oh, did you make that?"
Totally.
But yeah, and I get that question too, and you don't want to look like a jerk. You don't want to be like, I don't know. You tell me.
Right.
So back to my dad, my father, Jordan, told me this story once, and I think about it a lot in terms of the context of art making, but also the context of printmaking, which is this man. It's a Mexican folkloric story of this man who grew up in a family of actors, and he had played all of these roles since he was a kid. And one day he woke up and he didn't realize who he was. And he looked up to heaven and said to God, I've spent my life being all these things and performing in all these ways, and people assume all of these things about me, but I don't know who I am. And God looked back down and says, you tell me. Because
Mhm.
there's such a spiritual thing that happens with these three things. There has to be a collective belief when it comes to science, religion, and art, right? Everybody has to say, this is going to work. This vaccine is going to work. Everybody has to say, praying to this God is going to work. Everybody has to say, this painting is worth this much money in order for it. And that's
Oh,
why
wow.
all of these things have cultish behavior. People that, I'm buying, I remember it was the early outs. Oh, we're buying Chinese art. Or just the ways that I'm really good friends with Huck because we came up together with Jack Lemmon. And where I ran into you, it's just such a funny thing. You're in the chapel of that printer. The
Mhm.
print, when you are dedicated the way Tom and I have been to certain printers, you have their secrets. And when I ran into you in New York, I was talking to another printer, another print house, and they were like, "Hey, how did you get that line to work? How did you do that?" And I never would have told anybody that because the landfall press was closed, and I remember Jack Lemon we had waxed my plates and we were doing this thing, and he and Steve were spinning this thing and doing this thing with smoke. Totally felt some alchemy. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Oh, we're smoking the plate." And I was like, "Oh, you're smoking the plate. Okay. Where did you learn that, Jack? Was smoking the plate?" And he looked at me like, and I said, "Where did you learn about it?" He's Rembrandt's sketchbook. Like, wow, here is this Marine Depression era, lied about his age to get into the army or to become a Marine. And he's a magician,
Yeah.
right? And you think about alchemy and you think about it being this kind of like shyster thing, turning straw into gold. But what is it? Art is the ability to turn material into thought. So
Mm.
that's what religion is or spirituality is. That's what science is. That's what art is. And it's such a difficult and beautiful and confusing and it's process and it's a mess. And people do super shitty things in all of those arenas.
Anything that has that much power, people can wield it.
Power. Oh my God, you're so correct. You're so right, and you're so correct. It's power. And that's one of the things my partner always makes fun of me of, because I love powerful things. I love being in the company of powerful people. And it doesn't mean wealthy.
Mm.
Often those things get tangled together because power can build wealth and wealth can build power, but not always. Some of Jack is and was incredibly powerful printer. You look at Kara Walker's early prints and they still just kick you in the gut. You look at Cottingham and these 72 plate prints of photorealistic neon, a single plate that's got two stripes on it. Ah, incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing. You
Yeah,
look at
truly.
Tom, the beaver, just chipping away at wood. And it's a democratic thing, printmaking. It's accessible, right?
Mhm.
It's not just one. And a lot of people get confused about printmaking because they think, oh, you should make a print of that. It's, oh, I'll just take this painting, stick it on the Xeroxer and spin you out. A lot of my work that is my most powerful, and this is not funny, but Father Gander, that piece I did with Lawrence Lithography in 2006, I found out recently that about 6 years ago, that piece was, I think it's in the Library of Congress. And I was excited that I had been acquired by the Nelson Atkins Museum, because that piece really has held up over time about fairy tales and the words that I created. I've been working on them since 1998. But I was just like, what do you mean it's in the Library of Congress? And, oh yeah, didn't Deb tell you that happened? Deborah's dead. Deborah died. So you never, you can have the most organized spreadsheet, Excel sheet of where your work is and who bought it and whatever. But the nuances of where your artwork shows up is, I walked into rooms where somebody bought my work and then it ended up going to somebody else and then somebody else bought it. And so I mean, there's one of my favorite pieces, which is called California, is owned by Tatiana and Bob. And they were living in LA. They bought it from a Chicago dealer who bought it at an auction from a couple that died in New Mexico. And they're in Kansas City, and I've been looking for this piece. And my friend, who's an art scholar, called me and isn't this the piece that you've been looking for 2 years? And it's like, where are you? And he's, I think it was Parkville or something. Just because, like, I got it. We all had lunch together, and they've gone on to buy one of my favorite large paintings that I created. And how do you sit down with a student and say, there's no way that you just have to give up so much control at some point in order to make your work.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you have to work every day. I am in love with somebody, married to somebody who is as dedicated to his art making and the craft of it as I am. You really have to put in the work. If I don't draw every day, I lose my hand. If I'm not drawing, I'm writing, which is a form of muscle memory. You have to do it every day in one way or another. And then you also sometimes have to not do it. But that's also, it's just there, and there's no guarantee about anything. There's no
Yeah.
guarantee that you're going to be, because I know that people see me as successful, and then I see people who I consider to be far more successful than me. And they also have people that it's not a pyramid. There's no standing at the top and looking down. There's always a parallel universe where this painter is more respected or has more accolades, or they've sold out less, or they've sold up more. There's no rhyme or reason. I guess my first solo show, it was with Greg Kucera in Seattle. And what an amazing, him and his husband. What are they doing? They bought a castle in France. So I'll go on social media and I'll see these rooms just filled with their beautiful artwork, this lifelong collection. And I'm just so happy for them. They donated a large amount of money to a nonprofit they felt very vested in, and then they bought this castle. You just never know what direction the people that are involved in your art are going to take.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about this line in your artist statement that talks about rendering the progress of innocence into awareness and
Mm.
talking about, even in this, as it relates to the arc of a career, as it relates to anything. And I feel that's something that people associate with early years or with adolescence, but I feel I'm still doing that every day. I feel I am doing that at 40.
That's one of the first things I wrote about my work. I was like, I think I was a sophomore, that sentence. And
Mm.
there I am still, that line, literally the line. It's so incredible when you realize what you didn't realize. It can be very romantic when you realize what you didn't realize. It can be very devastating because we're always falling in and out of love with ourselves and falling in and out of love with our art. And we're making these very intimate decisions about the our legacy, whether we're doing it collectively or intentionally, by advocating for ourselves or documenting what we're doing, how we decide to work with social media and exploit ourselves. Exploit and exploit. There's only a slight change of vocalization, exploit versus exploit. And that line is also the English language is my favorite language because it's so tactile, chaste or chaste. And I really always just, as we get into these larger dialogues about if you can make, when you look at a Picasso or you look at Gauguin or you look at these people that did these things and what they did or didn't do, who said they did this, who said they, and it's a loss of innocence when you find out that somebody that you admire creatively did something shitty, right?
Mhm.
Does it make them a better or worse artist? That is the question. Have I made mistakes or things that I wish I had done differently? Oh, fucking absolutely. Are there people that I wish I had never let into my lives because they decided to try and steal my work and or they tried to extort money from me? I've at my lowest when I had nothing, these weird threatening emails. And I think that has something to do with being on a reality show. That has something to do
Mhm.
with being tuned in. That has something to do with people thinking that I am where I'm at because I have a trust fund or I fucked my way into a room. Definitely more something to do with being a woman. I haven't seen that sort of energy as much with men. And I also, in terms of innocence and awareness, I made a decision pretty early that I didn't want to be in shows that were labeled as all female shows. And while that cost me some opportunities, I believe that instead wanting to be in the all male show, I was in better shows and I didn't get cornered by the patriarchy as a feminist. And
Mhm.
I think misogyny exists within men and it also exists within women. Oh, we got the all female show out of the way. Now we can move forward and do blank. And that exists on so many levels in academia, especially when it comes to just compartmentalizing artists. And I remember one of my, one of my closest friends, I've shared two studios with him. There was this abstract gay art show, right? Big show. Got a lot of got a lot of accolades. And he is both an abstract artist and he is also gay, but he didn't get into the show. And I remember him saying, I guess I don't know if I was not gay or abstract enough to be in that show. I always think about that was because my work is not, it's definitely asking people to ask questions. And the language that I
Mhm.
use could be, even in the piece that you saw that I showed with Powerhouse Arts, it's Goldilocks, Goldilocks, what were you thinking looking for love when you'd been drinking? Could be an accusation. It could be a mother talking to her daughter. It could be a woman talking to herself. It's so much about the perspective of who is reading it and what they're hearing. And that is also that space between innocence and awareness when you learn those things. And
Mhm.
I love the fact that quite often with my work, if I have a show, there's always a moment where there's 10 to 12, 14-year-old girls gathered around my artwork, not wanting other people to see it.
Uh-huh.
It's theirs. And my sisters were born when I was 10. My mother and my stepmother gave birth about 6 weeks apart by my father and stepfather. And so as I became an adolescent, my sisters were going from infancy to becoming little girls. And I've always felt that with my work, and again, awareness. I feel when I was in my 20s, I was making artwork about being 12 or 13. I feel when I got into my 30s, I was making artwork about being in my 20s. Now I'm in my 40s, making artwork about being in my 30s. I wouldn't say directly 10, 10, 10, but as
Mhm.
we would say, my innocence is turning into awareness. Innocence, we think, oh, love's baby soft, or Brooke Shields being exploited by Richard Prince or whatever. You're just like, oh my God, this is insane. But oh, it's like Pretty Baby, whatever. Innocence is commercial. This is innocence. It's pink. It's inappropriate. But then there's a larger conversation of you can be an innocent 40-year-old. I mean, that Parker Posey personality when they're in Thailand, it's just, what are you going to do? Move to Taiwan? There are
Yeah.
people that just don't. They are so oblivious. They have grown up in a bubble, and we do have a narrative that the bubble pops, but it doesn't always. Some people are born into the bubble, they live in the bubble, and they die in the bubble. They never develop any awareness. And we are
Mhm.
seeing in real time that. And perhaps we are
Yeah.
always seeing in real time that. Because it's not necessarily based on class, it can be based on ignorance. And also a lack of curiosity. That is the how do you cannot teach people to be you can't make people charismatic and you definitely cannot make them curious. You either are curious or you aren't. You're either charismatic or you aren't. People either want to know what the hell you're up to or they don't. You either want to know what's going on or you don't. But how can you say to somebody, "Oh, are you curious about things?" I mean, there is a really fine line between being curious and being stupid and being brave. It's very messy.
Yeah, and all part of that arc into awareness, and as someone who does live in Thailand and interfaces with the world, I can't tell you the amount of times that people think I live in Taiwan. Like, that's that is real. That is very
My friend
real.
Melissa lives in New Orleans, and her boyfriend's trying to like, say anything that's really fancy, putting a piece of fruit in a drink. He just goes, "Oh, Taiwan, the southern fancy." Oh, it's so funny. Oh, Taiwan. And it's what's going on with these tariffs and this unawareness about making and quality versus luxury. And my side hustles, I founded and I've owned and I don't know, I have a lingerie shop. I have
Mhm.
this
Yeah,
lingerie shop
birdies, right?
and it's parties and it opened in 2003 and we won best lingerie shop in North America from this French organization. And we came in to Tribeca. We had a fancy dinner. We got an award. My business partner, Alexis Bergraby, and I were just floored. Oh my God. Casey, who's this beautiful tattooed employee of mine, she basically manages us collectively and the shop and keeps us laughing. She dyes her hair a different color every week. It's just it's just incredible having it being an artist that's dealing with femininity and the figure, and then also just having this window into the almost the most not hands-on because that sounds really sleazy, but these are the trends in sexuality right now. These are the trends in desire. I can just tell you what is and isn't going to work, what's going to fit, what's not going to. I've seen 40,000 sets of boobs.
Mm.
I've seen more naked bodies between drawing from the figure and my shop than probably most doctors at this point. Again, what's the difference between being naked and being nude? It's a big difference. But I can't tell you what the biggest difference between naked and nude is, but or the difference between sexuality and sensuality, why women can say, "Oh, tasteful." What is tasteful?
Uh-huh.
Or I guess also the way there's this kind of connection between art and lingerie is somebody will say, walk into Birdie's and say, "Oh, like I'm looking for something sexy." Okay, what is sexy to you? Like, I'm looking for a good painting. And you're like, what's a good painting
Right.
to you? We're so driven by our desire. It is the energy of evolution. Everything that is colored, and you should know you're in Thailand, everything that makes a sound, everything that has a scent, it's for reproduction. It's for production, right? Like
Mhm.
birds flock at each other to get attention to fuck. Plants get color so that they're more attractive to bees. It's all this big mash of making and attracting and turning on. It's what let's turning on the gallery lights, right? And also, not to be gross, but I'm always making these jokes because I don't even think people hear themselves. They're like, oh, I wanted to invite you to my soft opening. Who came up with soft opening?
Oh my gosh. I'm never gonna hear that again the same way. I don't think
I
any of our
know.
listeners
I
ever
was like,
will.
no. Like the soft opening is to the people that are more likely to buy your art. Oh, come on, let's just call it what it is.
That's incredible. Peregrine, I truly feel like I could talk to you forever, but we're actually coming up on the end of our recording time. And I think that is such a banger to
Thank
wrap up
you.
on. Would you let people know where they can find you and follow you? Where can they buy Birdie's lingerie, the best lingerie in North America?
America. We really have our website is garbage because we don't want you to buy stuff off the website, really. We would really just like you to go to the Instagram, which is Birdies Loves Me. And then my Instagram is a great spot to find out what I'm up to. I have a show in the fall in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and I'll be filling everybody in on that. And it's going to be called Rebirth.
Beautiful. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you.
This is a
Thanks for having
delight.
me. Yeah, have a
Yeah.
wonderful morning. Is it going to be morning over there? I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
But
It's
I'm
very.
so glad we ran into each other. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you.
If you like today's episode, we have a Patreon where you can help support our podcast and get bonus content like Shop Talk Shorts with past guests. But the very best thing you can do to support this podcast is listen, rate, follow, and share with your fellow print friends around the world. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you in 2 weeks.